Okay, off you go. Thanks, Sharifa.
Great. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Of course, I want to firstly formally thank the Emirates College for Advanced Education for supporting ABA Journal Club in receiving the free CEU. So we are really thankful, and thanks to Dr. Michelle for helping us putting this together. I mean, without her, we wouldn't be where we are today. And of course, the Association for Behavior Analysis. So thanks for them as well for their support and collaboration with us. Of course, I want to quickly introduce myself. I'm going to be the moderator today. We'll be discussing about telehealth mask wearing training for children with autism during COVID-19 pandemic. So I, as you can see, the co-founder of ABA Journal Club, as well as Sharifa Yateem Consulting, and coming soon, Sharifa Yateem Center for Rehabilitation. And currently I'm doing the doctorate study at British University in Dubai. So welcome everyone. So I'll just go ahead and start. Since we have a lot to cover, this article, it's quite a read, but it's amazing. I loved it, but I don't want to be biased, so I'll just continue with my presentation. So this is a reference for anyone that would like to read more about it, and we have the article available on the chat. Thanks to Dr. Michelle Kelly for putting the link on the chat. So make sure you can download it for free, and it's accessible. And this is the reference. So moving on. This is the overview of what we'll be covering today, a quick introduction to ABA Journal Club, the article information, the participant settings, the culture adaptations, and also materials used, response measurements, and IOA procedure results, discussions. And of course, as you guys got used to this in our third session today, is we always relate our articles to the 7 dimensions of ABA. I don't know why schedules is there. That's a typo. So 7 dimensions of ABA. And if you're not familiar with the 7 dimensions of ABA, stay tuned for the end of the discussion today, where we will be explaining them to you. So thank you so much. So quick background about ABA Journal Club. It's a volunteer-based and a nonprofit initiative that was put together by 3 Emirati BCBAs, myself, Manal Ariani, and Nusayb Al-Amiri. And we thought that would be great to kind of be together as a group to discuss the articles, as we do depend most of our decision, if not all of our decisions, clinical decisions, on evidence-based practices, and we have to go through those articles on a regular basis. So we kind of made sure that this club will be a regular thing every quarter. We don't want to bombard people with a lot of articles, but that would be good to keep everyone in this field in contact with the articles that we can discuss. Hopefully we have 2 more for this coming year, and we'll let you guys know when is the next session. Thank you so much. So our next point I want to point out is our membership is open. So we always thank the ACAE for helping us getting as much people as possible, but we can also send you the link for if anyone's interested for the club membership. Thank you, Dr. Michelle, for putting that link there. For anyone that would like to present an article, if you want to be a volunteer to present an article, we're open for anyone that is looking to present an article in the ABA Journal Club. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact any of the founders. You can contact me. I can, share my email on the chat as well, or the end of the lecture. So this is the link. Thank you so much. Please do follow us on Instagram. We're trying to be very active. So let's start with the introduction of our article today, which is basically telehealth mask wearing training for children with autism during COVID pandemic. And throughout this pandemic, I know that a lot of families, teachers, individuals themselves are having a difficult time to to teach individuals with autism to wear those masks for many different reasons. One of them could be their sensory issues. They can't really follow the COVID instructions that has been put out there, such as hand washing in a specific way, refraining from touching the face, wearing the face mask. So you'll see a lot of those escaping behaviors when you're trying to teach a child to wear the mask. And since face mask has shown to be one of the ways to kind of protect yourself. So it became a mandatory in public and crowded places. In some schools, at least in the UAE, they've mandated to have those masks. In some centers, even clinics, they've mandated that. So just to keep it out there that face mask was chosen because of the mandatory regulations that were put forth by the different government sectors. So what's the purpose of the study? They're going to evaluate the effectiveness of coaching caregivers via telehealth to implement ABA procedures to teach wearing masks to kids with autism spectrum disorder. And the procedures was we will discuss about the package of the procedure that they discussed, which was graduated exposure and shaping. Now, quickly about the method. The participants were 6 participants. 4 moms and 2 therapists were part of the study. The therapists were pursuing ABA, so they were a bit familiar with the procedures. And they were from different countries, which was very interesting to see that because of the COVID, the online kind of boomed, the online meetings kind of boomed. So now telehealth is the way to go for trainings. And so we have Belgium, India, Mexico, Costa Rica. They were able to recruit the participants through social media. And they had an inclusion criteria for participants. They had to have an ASD diagnosis and ages between 2 and 12 and a history of problem behavior associated with mask wearing. Now, what are the materials they used? So they asked the participants. Now, the experimenters used the video calling platform and a laptop. That's all. While the participants, they were asked to have them face mask during the sessions, a laptop or smartphone, and a fingertip pulse oximeter. So these are the 3 different things that were requested from the parents to have. Now we'll talk about what was the fingertip pulse oximeter. What's it for? Okay, going to the next point, the response measurement and the IOA, sorry, that was a typo again. So how did the data was collected? It was collected, 2 things was collected. The number of graduated exposure steps completed, and then the duration of the mask wearing in seconds per sessions. Okay. So what is the hierarchy steps of the graduated exposure steps? There were 12 steps, and these are the 12 steps. فهالخطوات Arabic really quickly. هذه الخطوات اللي استخدموها عشان يعلمون الطالب كيف يستخدم الماسك، إن يلبس الماسك بالتدريج. فمثل ما تشوفون هما 15 خطوات. So as you can see, there are 15 steps. However, if you can notice that there are 2 step 12. The reason for that was because 2 of the participants reported that they have a history of escape maintained behavior, and therefore it was determined prior to the treatment that the exposure hierarchy to them included an additional step. So what was additional step? Basically the seconds or the shaping time was broken down further. So instead of going from 60 seconds to 5 minutes, they went from 60 seconds, then to 150 seconds, then to 5 minutes. I hope that's clear.
Sharifa, sorry, Sharifa, can I just interrupt? We have a question from a participant, if that's okay. So Carla has her hand up. So Carla, if you just unmute yourself.
Oh, it's by mistake, sorry.
No worries, Carla, no worries. Sorry, Sharifa, please proceed.
Okay. So what was the hierarchy? So we talked about the hierarchy steps. What was the score? They basically scored it by correct if independent without occurrence of problem behaviors. So how did they objectively operationally define the problem behavior? Here they are. The problem behavior measurement, the operational definition of procedures of problem behaviors was throwing mask, shouting or crying with or without tears, removing or attempting to remove the mask, pushing away the caregiver or pulling away from the caregiver, wearing glasses over wearing his mask over the glasses to fog the glasses. That was a behavior that was also observed. And then lastly, they also discussed about the oxygen saturated hemoglobin in the blood. So there were some talks that people didn't want to have the mask because it affected their oxygen intake. So they also measured that to make sure that the kids were safe. They did not experience any hypoxia, which is a condition that causes deficiency in the amount of oxygen reaching the tissues. So that fingertip pulse that you see in the picture is an oximeter that detects the hemoglobin in the blood. All right, so they also measured the social acceptability and training procedure from those parents and caregivers, so from the participants. They used TARF-R, which is basically a standardized Likert type scale that measures the social validity. It's a questionnaire that participants had to fill in. And it goes from, strongly disagree to strongly agree. All sessions were video recorded, and the data collected was twice by two different experimenters. And as you can see, the percentage of the IOA was quite high for all participants between the two, the duration of the mask wearing and the problem behavior. They also looked into the treatment integrity. So they took the percentage of the number of following the steps implemented correctly with or without the experimenter's prompt. So they looked into, the presenting the instruction and the mask. Did they provide the prompts if necessary? So did they deliver the verbal praise and the preferred item activity? And did they terminate the session if problem behavior occurred, and if mastery criteria has been met? So across all sessions, 100% for 5 out of 6 caregivers met the treatment integrity. Okay, I'm getting messages there, just some comments about autistics has sensory stimulation. Exactly, that's why they've put this procedure together, because of those sensory issues. They do escape from the mask, and that is one of the reasons why they use this procedure in order for them to accept the mask. Now, what design did they use? Here is the design. They used a non-concurrent multiple baseline design. And for the ones that are not familiar with these kind of designs, you will see an example of it in a minute. And it was across 6 participants. Why did they use this design? It's because they wanted to evaluate the effect of their telehealth intervention. Again, still studies are increasing in the sense of, does telehealth with using ABA procedure works or not? And this is one example. So what are the coaching steps? They first instructed those the participants what to do next. So they would basically give them that verbal prompt if they needed so, then prompt them on the moment. So they would say, please help Maria putting the left loop. Maria had issues with her fine motor, so the putting on the loop was difficult for her. So they had to prompt the parent when to help. They also taught the participants about intermittent behavior praise. So good job, you praise the child for wearing the mask. And then they also signal the start and the end of the baseline treatment generalization sessions. However, prior to the session of the coaching during the telehealth, they took some extra steps. They first wrote out the list of teaching steps that will be carried out, the graduated guidance steps. They talked to the caregiver to repeat the steps vocally, and then given the written versions of the steps next to them during each session. Experimenter prompted caregiver throughout. The experimenter provided vocal instructions immediately if caregiver forgot to apply a step, and experimenter provided feedback to the caregiver intermittently during the session and after terminating the session. So these were some of the steps they had to take prior to the telehealth coaching. I'm getting a question here, or not a question, it's a comment. Great question, Mohammed. That is exactly what this article is about. They investigated whether shaping graduated guidance could be an effective intervention in this case. Thank you, Sarah, for clarifying that. So let's describe a little bit of the baseline. As you know, before putting any intervention, we want to make sure to see whether the intervention had an impact or not. So we, as behavior analysts, it is our duty to take our baseline data. So first, the caregiver would say, it's time to wear the mask. Then present the mask 30 centimeters distance from the child. If problem behavior occurred, they would terminate the session and remove the mask. If problem behaviors did not follow, then they would just verbally responded or prompted the individual to put it on. Now, what was the treatment? So once they're done with the baseline, they want to put the treatment in, and here are the steps for the treatment. They did an MSWO. So for the ones that don't know what MSWO, it is like a preference assessment, which has, we wanted to see what can motivate them. So they did like a assessment to see what are the things that could motivate them to support them when they do actually, do the skill or do the step that is required. And they use a 3-stimulus array that was previously identified by the caregiver. The caregiver then started by saying, time to wear a mask. And they modeled the mask wearing. They presented a favorite picture or children of familiar adults wearing the mask. So the kid would see that familiar people would put the mask, the parent would put the mask on, and then the caregiver started the purpose of wearing a mask was to keep others from getting sick. So they've also used some kind of social stories or explanation of why the mask was necessary. Thanks, Michelle, for putting that on the chat about the MSWO. And then after the adult had worn the mask for 3 seconds, or the participant or the child, they placed a face mask within 30 centimeters from the child. So they basically did that. So they had to follow the graduated guidance one step at a time. So it's only 30 centimeters away. Once they did that, they withdraw all the model prompts after the child has successfully completed step 1 and 2 twice. So just really quickly, just remind you, step 1 and 2 was here, face mask within 30 centimeters for 5 seconds. And then the second step with the face mask within 15 centimeters for 5 seconds. And then the next step would touches the loops on the face mask, holds the mask by loops, attaches one loop on the ear, fits the second ear loop by pulling the mask with one or the other hand, pulls and pushes top edge of the mask for a tight nose bridge adjustment, and then wearing the mask they gradually increase the time. So it started with 3 seconds only, then 5 seconds, 10 seconds, until they felt comfortable to move on to the next step of the exposure hierarchy. until they reached the 10 minutes, and then that was the removing the face mask using loops. So as you can see, they stopped at 10 minutes. All right, so yeah. So yeah, they withdraw all model prompts after the child has successfully completed step 1 and 2 twice. When the hierarchy is achieved without problem behavior, the caregiver would provide praise, deliver access to preferred items, and they would terminate the session. They allowed the child to play for 30 seconds before the next session started. The next step was prompt responses were followed by praise all the time to support and keep the session positive. The 10th step was the same session implemented again to ensure 2 successful occurrences of each step of the hierarchy before targeting the next step. So here's your criteria if that's something that you want to replicate. And then the 11th step with the session immediately terminated contingent on the problem behaviors. Now that would be a red flag for people would say, oh, they ended it on contingent and problem behavior. They actually wanted that in the program. So they also justified why in a second. Once participants acquired step 9, they withdraw or the session access to a preferred activity. And then from step 13 onwards, participant engaged in moderately preferred activity. On the 14th step, they terminated end of session access to preferred activity and conduct outdoor sessions to use it in the naturalistic reinforcement contingency and increase social validity. On the 15th step, the contingent on problem behavior caregiver terminated the session activity and returned indoors if there was some kind of problem behavior happening in the naturalistic environment. On the 16th, the terminal mastery criterion was wearing the mask continuously for 10 minutes over 2 consecutive sessions. They also did the generalization, and here are the description of your generalization procedure. There were 2 generalization probe sessions that were taken. The first one was using a different type of mask than the mask that was used during training. And the second generalization probe was the indoor or outdoor sessions, depending on the participants' training session. Now, the generalization probe sessions were terminated when they meet first the terminal mastery criteria was met, and the second if the child engaged in problem behaviors. So for the ones that are collecting the BCBA CEU code, CEUs, please write down your code. Article is the first code. Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to write this down. Yes, first BACB code. Please write it down. You will need this for your CEU certification that will be given by ECAE, and thanks to them. Yes, please do not write it in the chat. Thanks, everyone. All right. 5 seconds, and then we'll move on. Please take it now, because we're not going to write it in the chat. Countdown begins. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so I'm going to be changing the slide. So whoever joined us late, this is going to be your only chance. Article. Code 1, article. Moving on. Here are the results. Okay, so this is a multiple baseline design, as you can see, and I will basically, I'm going to cut the graph into 3 different parts depending on my participants, and as you can see, the baseline, intervention, and generalization phases. And on the left side, The x-axis is the graduated exposure steps completed in percentages. So 20, 40, 60, 80, 100%. And then the right side of the axis would be the consecutive minutes of wearing the mask. So it's 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, and 10 minutes. While the y-axis is the numbers of the sessions. So we have 5 sessions, 10 sessions, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 to 40 sessions. Okay, so let's dive into the results really quickly. So here we go for participant Thomas. As you can see in the baseline, just before our intervention, we had, he did not perform beyond step 3 of the graduate exposure hierarchy and did not exhibit mask wearing. So he refused to put on the mask. No, I don't want to put the mask. At step 3, he stopped. So I'm just referring to the steps so that I can mention it to you. I have the article printed out here. So step 3 was touches the loops of the face mask. That's it. He was able, he accepted 30 centimeters away and 15 centimeters away and touching the loop of the face mask, and that's it. He didn't want to hold the mask by the loops. Right, so, and then they started, as you can see, the white circles, the open circles are the number of steps, and the black dots are the duration. Once the intervention has started, as you can see, beautifully the article, the graph started to increase, the trend started to increase, and this participant Thomas did reach mastery level, so he did wear his mask at the end of these sessions. He took nearly 28 sessions. It doesn't show here, but here it did take him 28 sessions approximately for him to accept the mask. So it does take time for an individual with ASD to accept the mask if they had some sensory issues or any aversiveness of the mask. Then they tested the generalization, as you know, and they did the 2-probe generalization as mentioned earlier. They used the cotton mask instead of the surgical mask that was used during the training. And then they trained him they tested wearing the mask in a train journey. And he was able to put on the mask for the 10 minutes. So that was great. So that was amazing for the families and the parents that Thomas did actually wear the mask at the end of those trainings. Abhi was the next participant. He or she also started with the duration to be 0, but he, was able to meet to step 3, but as you can see, was going up and down. There were some problem behaviors going on. So the arrows, just for you to note, those arrows that you have pointed towards those pointers were donated for problem behaviors happening during those sessions. And the session was terminated, of course, when the problem behavior happened. So as you can see here for Abby, they also, as you can see, she also started to wear the mask. The duration was always 0, and then it started to increase the duration time. She also met the criteria, as you can see, 80% of the steps for 10 minutes. Same thing with the 2 probes, 80% of the steps for 10 minutes. Right, so she did 14 out of 16 of the steps. Now, Juan, if that's what I'm pronouncing it right or wrong, day 2, Juan also started with 0 minutes of putting on the mask. She stopped at step 4 as well. So 40% of the steps she stopped during the baseline, and then once intervention was started, of course, as you can see, a beautiful increase on the graph. That means she started to increase the percentages of mastery. So she mastered 15 out of 15 for 10 minutes. So that was awesome. And then they did the 2 probes with different masks only. The oxygen saturation for clients, as you can see, the mean and the range are there. They looked at the baseline and the training. There was no much differences between the oxygen levels. Actually, for one was 100% oxygen, so it did not affect their oxygen. Parents were worried that putting on the mask for those kids on the autism spectrum, that would affect their oxygen rate. But with that, that machine, they showed that their oxygen did not drop. And then the session duration per participants, as you can see, for each of those participants, sorry, I think I've missed the other 3 participants' data. I didn't put it in the slides. That's my bad. Terribly sorry. So as you can see, for the 6 participants, the mean range session of duration was discussion that was discussed. The aim of the study was stated. The study aim is to evaluate the effectiveness of telehealth services for delivering graduated exposure and shaping to establish mask wearing in children with ASD. The caregiver showed high treatment integrity. All the 6 participants tolerated wearing a mask for the duration of 10 minutes. And they did generalize it either with other masks or in the community setting. The oximetry analysis indicated that the mask wearing did not affect the oxygen saturation levels of the participants. Now, furthermore, caregivers found the training very useful and practical. They did not implement extinction. Okay, the result consistent to other studies using the same procedures, wearing the eyeglasses, hair cutting, neuroimaging scan shoes that a lot of the kids on the autism spectrum or individuals have issues in these kind of different items. Similar outcomes were shown across culture and language. They did not use physical prompting during baseline. However, they did mention for future studies to see the effect if they did prompt them during baseline. Oh, you can no longer see my slides. Oops. I don't know what happened. Let me try to...
Sharifa, if you just stop sharing and then just reshare again, it might have just been Dr. Missy though, because I'm able to see them and so is Dr. Sarah. Dr. Missy and anyone else who wasn't able to see them, sometimes there's an option on the top left that you can press. Yeah, but there's no harm in you stopping and sharing them again, Sharifa, just in case.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's a few people experiencing it. So once you've got them up again, I'll let you know. Yeah, perfect. So
what
Dr.
about
Missy,
now?
Yeah, Dr. Missy and Joe Kenneth, can you just confirm that you can see them now? Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, Joe Kenneth says all good. Please continue. Thanks, Sharifa.
Perfect. So for future studies, they did mention to prompt in baseline to see the impact of that, whether it's going to decrease the number of sessions, you know, so it would be interesting to see that in future studies. Maybe the future study is to use escape extinction, but they did not recommend that as it will be a procedure that may compromise the caregiver's adherence to the procedure. There were some limitations of the studies that was discussed in the article. They did not conduct function analysis for the problem behavior. They assumed that it was escaping, the function is escape. So they did not do the FA for the problem behaviors. They did not establish the mask on more than 10 minutes. So the 10 minutes was the cutoff time. They did not follow up. They did not do a follow-up probe. So it'd be interesting to see, maybe after a month or after 2 months, they adhere to wearing the mask. It would be good to test in different variety of settings of low preferred activities and to evaluate the effectiveness of mask choices. So giving a choice between, would you like the pink mask or the black mask? That would be something that you can consider in the future of the studies. They did not conduct a stimulus preference assessment to select the highly preferred activity. They just did the MSWO. Also, from their procedure, it wasn't clear if positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement determination of the session has led to the contribution of the outcome. So it'll be interesting to see, maybe another experiment to see the difference between those two. They did not measure fidelity of the experiment using the telehealth coaching. They did not, they assumed the caregiver had instructional control as they had some past experience with behavioral program. Some of the summary here, the study had add value to the literature since there's so many studies happening about telehealth. So it is one of the unique articles that was chosen due to its connection to our current pandemic. They did support the efficacy of procedure with diverse cultural background, which is not something that you really see in other articles. So I love that this is a new article and they embedded some of these culture sensitivity that has been discussed about in our ethics discussions to make sure that our studies and articles are not just applied with a particular population, but also I think that's one of the advantages of having, online platforms. They were able to reach other countries with other backgrounds and languages. Second code for the CEU is journal. Rola, yes, we did say it early. It was on the screen. Am I allowed, Michelle, to say the first code or not? I don't know. The second code is journal. Rola, you can email Dr. Michelle Kelly to get the first code. This is the second code. And we will now move on to our discussion of the 7 dimensions of ABA. Right, so here are the 7 dimensions of ABA. Get a cab. What does get a cab mean? These are the 7 dimensions. So as behavior analysts, we need to make sure that our articles, our procedures do meet the 7 dimensions of ABA. That was that's not screen. That's generality, effectiveness, technological, applied, conceptually systematic, analytical, and behavioral. And so always remember those, the acronym GET A CAB, so that you can always check yourself when you're putting those programs in if they do meet the standards of the 7 dimensions of ABA. So let's look into it. Generality. So we want to make sure those articles that we read have met generality, for this article at least. So generality means a behavioral change may be said to have generality if it proves durable over time, if it appears in a wide variety of possible environments, and or if it spreads to a variety of related behaviors. Bear-Wolf Risley, 1968. Thank you, Dr. Michelle Kelly, for sharing the article on 7 dimensions of ABA that explains each of the dimensions. So do you think, in your opinion, did this article meet generality? Were they able to prove that their program was possible in different environments, perhaps with different participants or in different times. I can see this really nice. Thanks for participating. So anyone just throw your answers into your, so yes or no, that would be great. So we can see, yes, the mask. We've seen that they've generalized it into masks and different environments. Do you think this article demonstrated generality? Yes or no? We're getting more answers. We'd love your participation. And this is an informal club that we always like to see your opinions about this. It's great to converse and discuss about these things. It will help you as practitioners to really think about these different questions. Yes, if you can raise your hand, that would be great. Or say your answers, that's also great. Thanks, Nseba. I'm getting a lot of yeses. I think so too. I think it does meet this dimension. I wanted to put the poll, but unfortunately, teams don't have that. So next time, maybe we can find an alternative way to get the poll working. Thanks, everyone. So moving on, has it shown effectiveness? So has the interventions shown effectiveness? So what does that mean? When they improve a behavior in a particular matter, practical matter, if the application of the behavioral techniques does not produce large enough effect for practical value, then the application has failed. So as behavior analysts, we want to make sure that the techniques, the behavioral techniques, had value, had an impact, had an effect on the wearing the mask for this article. So have they met effectiveness? Second dimensions of ABA. Yes or no? Yes, this is the main goal of training and program, that we want to see the effectiveness. Now, many, you'll see some articles from people that do read articles and review articles that there was no impact, no effect. So that's why we're always looking at our data. Yes, I think so too. So far they scored 2. I always like to give a score out of 7 if they've met the dimensions. Yes, the effectiveness, since it is timely. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for everyone that are participating and being active. It makes our session fun. Moving on. No, let's see this. Yeah, I think it was heading towards full effectiveness, but it depends on how long the children will need to wear the mask in their daily lives. Point, yeah. Because as you can see, as they mentioned, they only stopped 10 minutes. And, when we are traveling from one place to the other, we need to put it more than 10 minutes. They did mention that in their limitation as well. We have another participant. Is it also social significant because parents could then take children outside the house? Absolutely. Yes, thanks so much for your comments. Definitely. Technological would be the third. So that so they scored 2 out of 7 so far. Technological procedures, that means the procedures are described clearly and concisely so that others may implement the procedures accurately. All steps are written in details to get the desired result. Can you, I always say this, when I'm talking about technological, I always say, can I take this article and just apply it? Can I just do that? Is it clear enough for me? So do you think, for the ones that heard the treatment and the procedure, do you think you can copy the steps? Is it clear enough? Was it technological? can you tell the parents what to do using graduated guidance if you're using telehealth? I think so too. I mean, it's well detailed. If people have their articles in front of you, in table 2, page 74, is that exposure hierarchy. They kind of mentioned all of the steps of the exposure hierarchy, which is a load of work that you need to do before putting into any kind of shaping procedure. One part that was not technical enough, in my opinion, was how much the telehealth coaching was prompting the caregiver. True. They did not mention, but they just mentioned what were the things that they prompted the caregiver. Yeah, that was one of the limitations, right? So they mentioned that they didn't take social treatment. Treatment was validity of the telehealth coaching itself. They just mentioned the steps before the telehealth, the exposure hierarchy. I wanted to know more of like during their session. They also mentioned in page 76 the coaching. Sorry.
I was just going to ask a question just because I'm in academia, I'm not a clinician right now. And obviously during this pandemic, where a lot of youth therapists in our audience today are delivering intervention online. And I would just love to hear, and Sharifa, maybe you can speak to this as well, you know, what is it like prompting via an online forum? Like, are you finding it more difficult? Have you had to adapt? I'd love to just hear people's, you know, practical experience with prompting using telehealth, if that's okay, Sharifa.
Yeah, I mean, they did mention in the article that they did not use physical prompting as part of their coaching of the parent. I think that was, you know, one of the reasons is it's going to be difficult to explain through telehealth the physical prompting of wearing the mask. And I agree with that. It is challenging because you do kind of need to role model it. You know, when we're talking about the different stages of physical prompting, it takes quite a lot of sessions to train the parent how to do that. So I think one thing that was easy using the telehealth is basically using procedure that needs only the verbal prompting. And they also use that. Yeah, they did mention that the internet of some countries also was bad connection. Yeah, the technological is always like a recipe. Exactly. If you cannot tell a parent exactly what to do, then you failed as a behavior analyst. It can be slow with poor internet connection. This can give a delay between my instruction to prompt and the prompting being implemented by parent. That's absolutely correct. The time of when to prompt, when to reinforce is crucial. And so any delays can delay the program, will impact the program. We can give parents training for that. We can, before training, before the session, that would be good. Sending video modeling can also help a lot when it comes to training or prompt using and feeding. Exactly, absolutely. I do that too. The point of view videos really helps as well. Absolutely. And just considering the video modeling, just to consider the cultural barrier as well in the UAE. I always mention that because a lot of parents are very, very conservative about taking videos of someone, of their kids, for example. Nusaiba has a question. Yes, go ahead. Is there something I need to do?
It's just me answering Dr. Misha's question, because she did ask about using prompts during, for example, distance learning or in telehealth. So what we found, for example, families we worked with before the pandemic were able to use physical prompts because they have seen this before, they had that experience of observing it at least, or maybe they were even trained on using it. So that was easier to transfer with the help, obviously, of videos, etc. But I would understand, for example, in this article where they avoided using physical prompts because those families did not have that experience, although they had previous experience with behavioral programs. So I think I wouldn't want people to shy away from using physical prompts while using telehealth. Just see what the families can or cannot do.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And it did mention that they assumed that the parent had instructional control. And if they don't, then that would be another thing that they might need to work on before working on the putting on the mask. Always get consent for video footage and delete afterwards, and use as a safe server. Use a safe server. Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I love this discussion. Thank you guys for making this fun and discussing about these articles. I love it. Yes, thanks for the ethical reminder. We need to get consents, not just verbally. At least we get something written out there. That this will be used only for training and not for other purposes such as social media or anything like that. If there is an option for that, that's great. But it's also important to discuss this with the families, definitely. Yes, Dr. Missy, go ahead.
This is just kind of in addition to what Nusaiba was saying. I think through my experience, I'm not directly teaching any students, but kind of just knowing what's happening with a lot of teachers and families, I think that those families that continue to be really involved, I think that's where we see the greatest success. And we have been able to do, like, whenever you're able to do training with the, whoever is giving care at home, whether it's a sibling or a nanny or the parent, when you're able to do training with them to explain exactly what you want from them during this session. So if the teacher's doing a one-to-one session and the nanny is there to support, sometimes you get into the situation where, the nanny or the sister or brother is there helping, but they don't know what to expect. So it's great when we have the opportunity to do training with the family members outside of those direct instruction settings, because it's just makes a very clear example of what you want. You can demonstrate the skills, you can demonstrate the prompting, and then when you go back to those sessions, it just becomes so much easier for everybody to understand, what they're supposed to do. Get everybody that's in an instructional position on the same page and then proceed with instruction for the child.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Missy, for sharing your experience and thoughts. And I think that was one of the things that they did, which I liked, is prior to that live coaching when they are with their kids, is that they had that one-to-one sitting with the parent and went through all of the procedures of training using BTS procedural training. So I definitely agree with that really it does help those parents to understand the prompting procedures, that's effective for their kids. I've had the opportunity to train siblings and parents online to implement programs, and it's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. So that's another awesome idea. Yes, the BTS adds massively to the success of the program. If people are not familiar with BTS, maybe that would be something that we might put it together, maybe in the next sessions, coming sessions, to talk about, evidence-based practices to train using BST. Thanks. So the next would be, yes, thank you, behavioral skills training. So the next would be, sorry, there was one more comment before we move on. The change in routine to normal appointments as well as parents and therapists wearing. The change in, okay. So another comment was, we used to do orientation to the parents on the procedures and materials needed. We do video modeling as well as interactive telehealth sessions with the great help of the caregivers and parents. Absolutely. Right, moving on, because we're just looking at the time. It's already 5:55. Michelle, when are we wrapping up?
6:30, Sharifa. So you still have a half an hour, plenty of time.
Yay, fantastic. Okay, thank you. So the next would be applied. So the behavior change is applied when it enhances and improves the everyday life of the learner and those who are closest to the learner, such as the parents, siblings, peers, community, by improving a socially significant behavior. Is this important? Is this skill important for the child to understand and learn about putting on the mask? Of course. One said, of course. Some parents would be like, I don't care about putting the mask, you know, it's not an important subject. For some other kids, it's important as they're immune to getting sick. And so it has been advised by the WHO to ensure they put on the mask. So has it been applied? Yes or no? Yes, and we have thumbs up too. What do you guys think? Other answers? Do you think is important? Did it enhance the kids' lives? Did it enhance the families' lives? For that, we need to prepare the parents first. Yeah, absolutely. We can always go back to the parent and ask them about whether they did enhance. So they did the social validity for this. That's why they wanted to tap on the applied section. They wanted to see whether this procedure was, you know, something that they would accept, you know. And I think that's very important to ensure that our procedures are acceptable. And the questions that they asked in the social validity questionnaire was, I'm just going to read them out loud for you. I found this training to be acceptable way to acquire the skill necessary to teach my child to wear a mask. The next question was, I believe that my child did not have any adverse reaction to the training. Third question was, I liked the training. Fourth question was, I found it easy to implement the procedures. Fifth, I believe it would be acceptable to use this training and with caregivers who intend to teach their children to tolerate wearing a mask. Sixth question was, I believe that the training is likely to result in my child generalizing the skills acquired. Seventh was, overall, I had a positive reaction to this training. And lastly, I'm satisfied with the result obtained with my child during the training. So they had that questionnaire sent to them at the end with a Likert scale between 1 to 5. 1 strongly disagree to 5 strongly agree. Absolutely. So some parents might have a different idea. So always go back to the parents before putting an intervention saying, is this an issue that you want to tackle? Is the kid going to be out and about and he might need to wear the masks on? If that's necessary, depending on the area, depending on the country as well, depending on the the mandating laws of the country is important.
I was just going to ask that, Sharifa. Sorry, did you say, is it mandated in the UAE that people of determination wear masks?
So far, what I've heard that it's not. I've heard it's not, but I'm getting different answers, to be honest. Yeah, but I think it's not in where I read it in the news. But I don't know if that's changed recently or not. Maybe someone else could give their opinion about that. Some parents
yeah, actually, sorry, Sharifa, Manal has her hand up, so perhaps she has something.
Yes, go ahead.
Sharifa, how are you?
Hi.
I would share something that I experienced. Clear instruction from the school that if she is not keeping her mask 100% of the time, we cannot accommodate her during COVID time. It was very clear. And we worked on this for a period of time, making sure if she couldn't keep it for a long time, she needs to be outside the classroom until she can stop experience, and this is in one of private schools in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah. So as you can see, exactly. Could, thanks for sharing, Manal, your experience. So yeah, some schools, some centers are required to, put it on. So it's best to kind of think about these kind of things. And as you can see, ABA does have that solution. We have some more, someone's raised their hand as well. We have someone raising their hand. Please go ahead.
Sorry, it's Nicole. I just want to share my experience with the adults that I work with. When we go to the mall, we have to try and put masks on our adult people of determination. And we basically have our staff ID and we have to explain this is a person of determination. They don't have to wear their mask. We do try to enforce it, but obviously it's causing them great stress and anxiety. So we just have to make sure that when we go to malls for social items, we inform security, or if we get asked any questions, that we always have our ID, and the security staff are aware of that. But they try to get us to physically put the masks on our residents to show that actually they physically won't do it. So that's our experience just with going to the malls in Abu Dhabi.
That's interesting. That's so interesting. Thanks for sharing. I mean, here it's not mandatory for kids as well, just like in Ireland. We have someone here mentioned that. It's same thing here, but as you can see, like from people's different experiences, depends on the setting, I guess. So it's important that we might need to look into training our kids to accept it, or there might be some kind of medical reason for it. Be interesting. So some more, we have some more information. We've got some nice questions here or comments. They would not blame we have a comment here saying that they would not blame the children being on the street without a mask, and this they've witnessed many situations where the children they work with. Masks are not mandatory in Ireland. Siblings as coaches, peers is definitely key right now, definitely. Same of the inclusion students that I work with, they need to wear the mask all the time. So here you go. That's your answers. And we have someone sharing from Gulf News. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Apart from medical reports, key documents that must be submitted include the applicant's Emirate ID. The following are the category of individuals who will be exempted, from the face mask rule. So those suffering from fungal dermatitis, allergic reactions, individuals with severe herpes, individuals with acute, patients with uncontrolled asthma, people of determination who have mental and psychological conditions. There you go. Just print that and keep it in your pockets. Thank you for sharing that that article. If we have a survey of how many kids that accepted to put their mask, we will have a data that will allow us to identify whether to increase working on the skill or not. Absolutely. So I think it's better to work on those participants that you're currently working with, if that's an issue that you're facing. So POD are exempted from wearing masks. There you go. All right, so we're looking into the moving on. I think we all agreed the applied part was a yes. So far, 4 out of 7. The next was the conceptual systematic. So what does that mean? Interventions are consistent with the principles demonstrated in the literature and in the research. It is important that practitioners continue to use research-based techniques and avoid using any shortcuts in their teaching methodologies. What do you guys think? Yes or no? Was it conceptually systematic? Did they use principles from the literature and from research? Was it evidence-based? Come on, bring your answers, guys. We want to see your opinions about this. This article was done in collaboration with Ghent University, the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and Ghent University in Belgium. And it was published in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. So yes, we can see we're getting answers. Yes, many EBP used, evidence-based practices, and that's what we want to do as part of behavior analysis. We want to make sure that we're using evidence-based practices to ensure that we're progressing in our methodologies. Now, we don't want to, we want to make sure that we're encouraging families to work on research-based techniques and practitioners. So Sarah, yes, thank you. They've used shaping, differential reinforcement, using the graduated hierarchy, everything tied back to the principles of behavior. How to use sanitizers? That's a good question. We can, that would be interesting to use the same procedure using hand sanitizers if that's something that they're not accepting to put on. Definitely that's something that we can discuss. Yes. I love those comments. Keep at them. So I think, yes, I think that would also meet our article. As behavior analysts, we want to make sure that you know your principles. You're going back to your principles to discuss these kind of programs. Okay, I think it's time to move on to the next dimension, which is analytical. What does that mean? The practitioner is able to show that whenever he or she applies a certain variable, the behavior is produced. And whenever he or she removes this variable, the behavior is lost. So do you think that the intervention itself had an impact on the behavior, or was there something else going on? Do you think their procedures had an impact on the participants? The intervention had impact on the participants' mask wearing. I think one of the reasons they also use the non-concurrent multiple baseline design is to show that since they cannot unlearn a skill, so they can't do the A-B design, right? So this is important for us to understand, that why did they use this kind of design and not another design? And I think that was important that they discussed that. It was shown from their data, and they proved it through their kind of design that it was analytical. We've seen through that, staggering design that they didn't start to teach another kid unless they've seen a stable data of, for example, Abby. Same thing with the rest of the participants. I think they were very well organized in that sense. Yes, so many yeses. Yeah, so it's not a great skill to use as an AB design. You can't unlearn putting on the mask. Within each graduated guidance step, there was pretty good stability as well. And when you look at the within participants data, absolutely, they really were able to look at that. I think that this design was well done. All right. So I think they scored a yes for that. The sixth one. So far, they're doing great. 6 out of 7. The last one is behavioral. The behavior chosen must always be something that you observe and you can measure by defining a behavior that makes it easily observable and measurable. We are able to study it for proof of improvement as well as lack of improvement. So do you think that they targeted a behavior that could be measured and that you can see it in order for you to know whether intervention has had an impact or not? Yes. So many yeses. So do you think wearing the mask was a good behavior to target? Were you able to observe it? Were they able to measure it? There are many behaviors targeted here, definitely. You know, can you mention some of the behaviors that were targeted other than the mask wearing? The hierarchy, absolutely. We can, there's a question, I think yes, but the problem is when COVID disappears, the wearing mask will be as a routine. So how will we change that again? You mean stop wearing the masks? How we can change that routine? Is that what you mean? I can't predict whether COVID is going to disappear anytime soon, to be honest. Removing the mask by loops. Yeah. Putting loops on ears. Pushing edges down on the nose. So they're all specific behaviors that we want to see if they did it or did not do it. Now, I think that's important for us as well. Like even for social validity, you know, they made it measurable. You know, using TARFR, the treatment acceptability rating form revised. So they looked at the social validity, what they thought about it. So they also made sure that whatever they thought about, they made it measurable. I think that was very clever too. Measuring private events. Task analysis of the task are all behavioral. Yes, I think that we had a comment here. It will, of course, it's not going to be disappeared soon, but we can add some social story as well as part of their therapy, explaining about the new changes. Maybe that's something that you want to test it out and see whether social story has an impact on putting on the mask. But they did mention that the parents had to explain to them. They didn't mention if they used any pictures or social story. I'll be interested to see how they explained. How was the parent able to explain it as it was part of the procedure? And I wonder if we had some kind of, you know, a pictured explanation that will, I haven't found it, at least I don't remember reading it. Oh yeah, they actually did, sorry. They actually did. They mentioned in page 77, they included photos, so both in vivo and picture prompts, of the modeling of the wearing the mask, because the pictures served as a static model with preferred individuals, and the in vivo model served as a dynamic model of the steps involved. Static model versus dynamic model of the steps. That's interesting. And they chose someone that they know or prefer. That's also interesting to think about. All right, so yeah, so prerequisite, sorry, So maybe the requisition of placing mask on prior to wearing makes wearing behavioral too. Always goes back to the dead man's test. Absolutely. Great. I love this conversation. Absolutely. Just to think about it, it's important to always question those interventions, those packages that they put, those principles that was chosen. Always think about these kind of things. All right. So I think number 7, which is the behavioral, they've met it as we have agreed as a group. Even with generalization, they've tested it to make sure that they showed some proof of improvement in different settings. So it's, yes, 7 out of 7. Fireworks. 7 out of 7. The last session, they didn't score 7 out of 7, by the way. Not all articles in ABA score 7 out of 7. So I think, you know, clapping to the articles. I'm glad that I found this article, and I hope that you guys liked it. I think definitely these are the things that we've been discussing throughout COVID pandemic. How can we use ABA to teach those behaviors, since everything that is mandated is behavioral? You know, we can do so much with our science. So I think definitely there's a question here. What has been your experience teaching your clients to wear masks? I think that's such a good question. From my experience, we were able to use, before even, you know, finding this article, we used shaping, graduated guidance. We definitely did that. You know, the therapist or the caregiver actually applied this, and we've seen amazing, you know, longitudinal even. You know, a lot of the clients that I worked with, they did continue to wear the mask for more than 10 minutes. I definitely put that in my mind. Now I have a individual, he actually goes and picks up the masks before going out. It became like a routine now. So I'm just really, really proud to see that, you know, it feels so good to see that the behavioral principles, when applied correctly, you do see an outcome. And of course, removing those aversive or punishment procedures that, you know, we don't want to force them. We don't want to shout at them. We don't want to, you know, make them feel bad about not putting the mask on, or scare them, as I've seen with some parents, like, if you didn't do with the mask, the monster COVID will come and attack you. You know, I've seen these kind of treatments, quote unquote, and that kind of just creates a trauma for those kids, right? So I think this is a very positive, using positive reinforcement. And again, part of their argument was it's positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement that was the key role here. One of the someone said, I haven't taught any children this, so no children are required to wear masks in children in Ireland. Yeah. So, you know, the adults that I work with, they are required, and even during the sessions, they are required to put on the mask for some reason. Yeah, that the mask, the Superman or Spider-Man can protect you, you know. I mean, definitely these are some of the things that you can do to kind of let them pair the mask with something positive. But also, you know, taking consideration their sensory issues and how we can help them, you know, tolerate the mask without getting into trouble. Because if they don't put those masks on, as we discussed earlier, in some areas, in some places, they actually prevent from the child being part of the social community. So that's a big issue. Does someone want to speak up about something? Please do raise your hand. You're free to talk about anything in your opinions about these kind of procedures. We definitely think this article proves that behavioral principles can have a huge role in ensuring those kids that we work with do follow those mandated applications for protecting yourself and protecting others from spreading the virus. Can we do it with hand washing? Can we do it with sanitizing, using sanitizers? But do we use graduated guidance or shaping for that? Maybe there's another principle that could be worked on for these kind of specific, for that specific skills. It's based on what his story is preferred. Yeah, so you can, some kids, they like to talk about why those masks is important to protect, just like, for example, Superman or Spider-Man protects, so that they kind of pair the mask with something that they like. Same idea with the article. They paired wearing mask with people that they know and they like. And so they saw those pictures of his cousin, his sibling, or whoever they liked having those masks on. And giving that time for the parent to put the mask on to show them that it's okay. So they modeled it before requesting or giving the instructions to do this, the graduated hierarchy step. I definitely enjoyed reading this article. If you haven't read this article, I definitely advise you to do so, as I think, you know, it can open your mind regarding, you know, the putting together an article where you have to take your response measurements, your inter-observer agreement, you know, social validity is so important. I mean, in the past articles, if we talk about like even 5 years ago, you barely see someone testing social validity. And I think this article did a good job in looking into the social validity, especially that we're living in a country that research is in the field of ABA, at least, it's not very popular in this region. I hope so in the future we'll see more research coming out from this population to see whether this kind of principles can be applied with this population. But I think they did amazing with providing that insight. Some masks are washable and some are also sort of anti-fog, and that can be useful for teachers. Absolutely, thanks. My client was older and he used the mask in outdoor activities with some verbal prompting, and he loves to sanitize his hands all the time. Yeah, some kids just love keeping themselves clean. Yeah, like taking pictures of him wearing the masks, just pairing the mask with something they enjoy, they like. If they like superheroes, putting the mask on superheroes themselves. Pictures of Superman putting on a mask, if you can edit, if you're good on Photoshop. Thanks, Michelle, for sending the article. We have 5 more minutes to discuss anything that you've felt, you know, if you're in concern with any things that happened during the article, please do share. We also have the link of the BACB CEUs in the link. Remember to also follow us on ABA Journal Club on Instagram. Please also share your survey answers, as you know, we are just a new entity, you know, a new non-volunteer organization that we're trying to spread awareness about ABA through articles. And please do share your input. Please do share any items that you feel or topics that you feel that you want to learn more about. And thank you so much. I mean, this is my contact details. If you have any questions, please do email me anytime. Thank you so much, Sharifa, for your thoughts and insight presentation. Bravo. Thank you so much, Dr. Dean. That makes a big thank you so much for that comment.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Dr. Lena just said. Thank you so much, Sharifa, by being so thorough and very comprehensive overview of the journal article. And I think everyone really appreciates that systematic approach that the ABA Journal Club has in going through the article by looking at the 7 dimensions. So I think that's a really nice structured way of us analysing articles and a really great framework for students and for clinicians and academics alike. So thank you so much, Sharifa. If you don't mind me just doing some administrative announcements, thank you so much. So as you can see, I just posted a ton of links. The most noteworthy are for those BACB certificants in the audience. Please, there's a link there to access your CEUs. Please enter your email address correctly, and please note that it will likely go to your spam account if you have not used these links before. So please do check your spam. You will get the certificate almost immediately. You'll get it within a couple of minutes. So just check your spam, or for those who have already gotten certificates from us at ECAE, it will come to your inbox. If there are any issues, please let me know, but just make sure that you're entering your BACB number and your email address correctly, and check your spam. As Sharifa just said, I've also sent you a link for an evaluation survey. We really do appreciate your responses in these surveys because they do help guide the ABA Journal Club in the types of articles you want to see in future Journal Club sessions, and also what you're enjoying about the session and what suggestions for improving it even more. So thank you all so much. And of course, we do encourage you to join the ABA Journal Club, which is led by the only 3 Emirati BCBAs. So fantastic job to Sharifa, Manal and Naseba, who are all here this evening. And we look forward to the next session. If there's any questions, please let us know, pop it in the chat or just unmute yourself. But for now, thank you so much again to Sharifa. Everyone, please take care, wear your masks, use your sanitizer and be safe, and we'll see you at the next session. Thanks again, Sharifa, and to the ABA Journal Club. See you soon.